Welcome to Morning Joe Weekend on this Saturday morning. Let's get you caught up on the big stories of the week.
So much to discuss right now about where the president's standing, not only with Democrats, but mainly with independents and even some Republicans. There's a Fox News poll out yesterday that shows the single issue that matters most to Americans is the single issue where Republicans are doing the poorest.
And it's tied to the war. The latest Fox News poll shows Americans growing increasingly pessimistic about the state of the U.S. economy. 70%, 70, believe the economy is getting worse. That's up 15 points from this time last year, matches a previous record high. Twice as many say the president's policies are hurting the economy as opposed to helping. And a majority say grocery and gas prices, along with health care and housing costs, are a major problem. On the top issues, a combined 43% cite inflation. Affordability or the economy is their top concern. The issue of immigration trailing far behind there. So, Jonathan Lemire, obviously this is directly tied to the war, the inflation that's come in just the last 8 or 9 weeks or so as a result of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, which Donald Trump says the United States is in complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's objectively not true. He said that yesterday. This is a problem, not just the morass that has become the war, but the domestic problems that come with it.
No question. And to Joe's point, there are many analysts who say, yes, it's good that President Trump isn't cutting and running from the war in Iran because of the mess it would leave behind and leave Iran fully in control of the Strait of Hormuz. But something has to give. And he can talk as much as he wants about how, well, we use it less. And it's true, American ships use it less than others, but the energy economy is a global economy. The oil market's a global market. We're all feeling it. And it's not just energy. We're seeing prices rise across the board, and that poll suggests people are deeply unhappy. And we also shouldn't forget, of course, that when Trump won in 2024, that was his signature promise. I'm going to bring prices down. And he's done exactly the opposite here. And he also, by focusing on the sort of international adventurism, Jim Vandehei seems like he's out of touch. And I think that's what these polls reflect as well, that Democrats, independents, and even we're seeing some Republicans growing dissatisfied with his stewardship of the nation, saying what he cares about, and that is clearly enriching himself and his family, and also clearly trying to create a legacy, whether that's redrawing the world's maps or building ridiculous arches in Washington, D.C. He cares about those things and not the things that actually matter to our lives.
Yeah, and you need to put the polls in some context. It's almost impossible in modern polling, given the ideological impulses of base voters, to get much lower than he is in terms of his unfavorable ratings, but also how unpopular he is when it comes to the economy, when it comes to inflation, even when it comes to, the non-border enforcement part of immigration. Like, he is very, very low. Still has Republicans, most Republicans with him, but that's even sinking. And I think the biggest alarm for him and for Republicans is they look at the House map and it looks like almost impossible for them to keep control of the House. They look at the Senate and they start to look at states like Iowa, Ohio, Alaska, Texas, Maine, all which should be very, very winnable, maybe not even competitive, and they all look suddenly in danger. To me, the most interesting thing is talking to people around the president. Their language and body language has changed markedly in the last 2 months. They know they're in a huge hole and it's going to be really, really hard to get out of it. They don't even really defend it anymore. They understand that we're here by a series of choices that the president made by himself. How to prosecute this war was his choice. To do tariffs the way he did was his choice. To unleash ICE into neighborhoods before ICE was properly trained to do it was his choice. To then promote that in a very chest-thumping type of way was his choice. And now Republicans are having to pay for that. And I don't think you're going to see Republicans in Congress necessarily turn on him in force. But I can tell you right now, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the people around the president to change this cabinet, to get some more people in here, some fresh blood, some clearer thinking. Or they worry they're just going to get wiped out. And as we're reporting this morning, day one, Democrats will impeach him. I don't think he cares that much. He's been impeached before. He'll survive it in the Senate. But that's the fate. And he can ignore the subpoenas. Oh, his friends and family can't. All those companies can't. He's coming for a political hell, and that's going to be tough.
Well, it's going to be difficult on one side of it. On the other side of it, Donald Trump even told me after he got elected, that he understands that it was all the trials, it was the perceived political persecution that got him elected president. He said, if they'd only charged me with one crime, I'd be in big trouble right now. But they came after me time and time again. And I wonder, Jim, if there's not a part of him that's thinking, okay, I'll be much better fighting against the Democratic Congress where they're trying to impeach me and they'll never succeed. I'll win there, too, and my numbers will go up. So I'm just wondering, because at this point, it would seem that Donald Trump in the past would have backed down and would have figured out a way to go into Iran for 2 weeks and come out. Now, the further we get into this war, and I will say strategically, there are a lot of our allies in the region, the UAE, the Saudis, others, that are glad he's staying in there and not cutting and running, because that would even be a bigger long-term disaster. But I'm just curious, does it seem to you that he actually is focused more on his legacy of being the one president that can do what 7 other presidents have not been able to do with Iran since 1979? And if he loses the midterms, okay, they're going to impeach him again once, twice, 3 times, and he's going to win all of those, and his numbers are going to go up.
I just don't think that's how he thinks. I've seen no evidence whatsoever that he spends time thinking about his legacy or even thinking about 1 or 2 weeks from now. He's very reactive to what's sitting in front of him and where he can use the powers of the presidency to do what he wants to do on his term, or just pick up the phone and try to shape public debate, public discussion, usually around him. You're definitely right that he's probably in a better political position when he's fighting Democrats who are coming at him from 1,000 directions. I would say that strategy works better when the economy is strong and when people feel like prices are coming down, unemployment is low, that their prospects of getting better pay and a better job are higher. I think that is the big problem. Jonathan Lemire talked about it earlier. Remember, the central promise of this presidency is I'm going to focus on the working class, I'm going to tame inflation, and we're not going to go into foreign wars. None of those have happened. That's not a political statement. That's an empirical statement. Go down that list. It's absolutely true. And that's why he's in the political jam that he's in. And now his political jam is a Republican political jam. And I think it's going to be really hard to extricate yourself. Even if you get out of this war, the second order consequences of what's happened in the Gulf and what's happened in that region, that's years. That's going to affect oil prices for years. It's going to affect Middle East infrastructure building for years. It's going to affect our own economy for years. The New York Times has some wonderful reporting by Jonathan Swan this morning just about how much munitions we've blown through in the Middle East, and we've blown through so much of the munitions that government officials think it might be impossible for us to defend Taiwan.
Jim,
and China
can I ask you this
moves on it.
question? Jim, can I ask you a question on this? How do we spend trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on defense through the years? How do we spend more money than on defense than maybe the next 14, 15 countries on the planet? How do we do that and then run out of munitions when we fight a 1-month war, when we give munitions? We heard a lot of this when we were giving munitions to Ukraine last year and the year. Oh, we're running short on munitions. Really? Like, we're building this advanced weaponry that's costing hundreds of billions of dollars, and we can't even fight a war against Iran for a month or so without getting reports that we're running out of munitions. How does that happen?
The way it happens is one of the most important stories in the world today, which is because of technology, you can build a drone at $25,000 to $75,000 a pop, and then it allows the Ukrainians to fight Russia to a draw so far, and it allows Iran to be able to go to war with America and wreak havoc not just on our missiles but also on our allies. And they're spending $25 to $75K a pop. We're often shooting at these drones or having to defend ourselves with things that take years and years and years to produce, missiles that cost millions and millions of dollars. It's called asymmetry. And that asymmetry that you're seeing in warfare is now going to unfold across business. It's going to geopolitics. You just don't necessarily need big size and might. And we have an amazing military. We have amazing weaponry. We have intelligence that would knock the socks off of the Chinese and any other company that could, or any other country that could look at it. It just changes the equation. And the Iranians aren't stupid. They stockpiled that. They watched the Ukrainians do this. And so like, hey, we'll stockpile a ton of these low-cost drones. We'll wreak havoc. not. And we'll try to use asymmetry to give us power so that the next time the U.S. or Israel thinks about striking us, they won't do it because they're going to see the hell that we can unleash in the Strait and therefore unleash on the world economy.
Yeah, and this is so important to underline. We have, I saw an important Washington newsletter this morning, a recitation of all the remarkable military achievements we've done. Just unbelievable, extraordinary success. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And I keep going back to, we've degraded the Iranians' ability to fire missiles. We've degraded the Iranians' material to do this. It reminds me of what a CIA analyst who knows Iran probably better than anybody in the government told me weeks ago. He says, when I hear them talking about the percentages of weaponry that they've destroyed during this war, it reminds me of the body count numbers that we would get in Vietnam. Just not relevant.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, U.S. soldiers facing charges after being accused of using insider information to make a winning bet on the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Made money on it. We'll talk about that and the growing pattern of some well-timed trades during Trump's second term. Insider trading. The New York Federal Prosecutor's Office says Gannon Ken Van Dyke placed bets on the prediction market site Polymarket in the week leading up to the operation. The indictment alleges he wagered about $33,000 and ultimately won almost $410,000. The Justice Department is charging the 38-year-old with unlawful use of confidential government information and commodities fraud, among a number of other charges. He faces a long prison sentence if convicted. President Trump was asked about prediction markets in general yesterday.
Are you concerned that federal employees are betting on these prediction markets and potentially getting rich?
Well, I don't know about it, but was he betting that they would get him or they wouldn't get him?
It sounds like he was betting on his removal from office, that Maduro would be removed.
Well, that's
it sounds like
interesting.
he was involved in the operation.
That's like Pete Rose betting on his own team. It's a little like Pete Rose. Pete Rose, they kept him out of the Hall of Fame because he bet on his own team. Now, if he bet against his team, that would be no good, but he bet on his own team. I'll look into it. The whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino. And you look at what's going on all over the world, in Europe and every place they're doing these betting things. I was never much in favor of it. I don't like it conceptually, but it is what it is. No, I think that I'm not happy with any of that stuff, but they have all these different sites. They have predictive markets. It's a crazy world. It's a much different world than it was.
Pete Rose making a cameo. This comes as Kalshi suspended 3 political candidates Wednesday for betting on their own races. There's also increased scrutiny over these platforms after several well-timed bets were placed prior to the U.S.-Iran ceasefire. Joe, the president is right that this is clearly a problem. Just interesting that he says he's against betting, the man who ran casinos for much of his life in Atlantic City. But there is no doubt this case of the U.S. Special Forces soldier, the most prominent of them most recently, but this is going on all over the place. And we're seeing charges, accusations, whispers of it inside the Trump administration on other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, and Jim Vandehei, it's... Again, I can't believe, and we mentioned this weeks ago, the stupidity of people in the administration, connected to the administration, connected to decision making, that are passing along information, apparently, to people on Wall Street, or making massive bets before invasions, before peace plans, before announcements of ceasefires, and people getting extraordinarily wealthy. It's as if they think, they're operating in 1957 instead of 2026, where everything can be traced. Everything can be traced. Every wager can be traced. I guess this is just a natural outcome of a country that has just been swallowed up by gambling. And it is. President ran casinos. It's fascinating. He thinks it's a problem. I certainly think it's a problem for, an entire new, entire generation of people who are going to be betting on everything.
Well, it'd be like leaving your kids home for the weekend with a fully stocked bar, unsupervised, and think, they're not going to drink. I mean, if you allow people to gamble anonymously on anything at any time from anywhere, look what you get. This is what you're